The sculptor who created it used a secret recipe to shape the ivory. But how did he achieve such realism? The originality of its design has inspired artists and sculptors to copy it throughout the centuries. The Pharos, a lighthouse, was the world's first skyscraper, standing over 400 feet high. How were the ancients able to build so high without modern equipment? The Pharos blasted its golden light 50 miles out to sea. What mechanism could cast a beam so far? For centuries, the secrets of its construction lay hidden beneath the sea.
So we are on the place here, on the underwater site.
Now, a marine archaeologist and his team are recovering its remains from the sea floor to discover how the Pharos once stood. The 7 ancient wonders created the building technologies of today.
It was the invention of the crane by the ancients that enabled them, and now us, to lift heavy weights high onto a building.
The ancients dared to build high. Until little more than a century ago, the Great Pyramid remained the tallest structure on Earth. Only with modern engineering have we mastered the technology to build higher, giving rise to our finest skyscrapers, and even buildings made out of glass.
One thing I learned to respect the Egyptians is the proportion of that pyramid. The Egyptians were right 4,000 of years ago.
The ancient builders took risks to attempt the impossible. Now, nothing is left to chance.
The computer has allowed us to test designs that before we couldn't have tested. And that's given us the confidence to actually proceed with these designs and be daring. A good example of an early use of the computer was Sydney Opera House, which was a very unusual structure.
Today's creations stretch to the heavens, but their foundations are embedded deep in the past. They rest upon the 7 wonders of the ancient world, which still challenge and amaze us after thousands of years. Their origins lie in the ancient Greek world. Although all 7 wonders lay inside the Greek Empire, only one stood within mainland Greece. In the 5th century BC, Greece was invaded by Persian armies. By 480 BC, the Persians had taken Athens, destroying much of the city. But the Greeks fought back and defeated the Persians. Within 10 years, the statesman Pericles came to power. Athens was rich from the spoils of war. Pericles commissioned monuments glorifying its victory, including a new temple to the goddess Athena, the Parthenon. It was decorated with lavish friezes. The most famous are known today as the Elgin marbles. The finest Greek sculptors worked on the Parthenon. Pericles was so impressed with one in particular, named Phidias, that he made him the chief designer. Phidias would become the Michelangelo of the Greek age. Phidias was asked to make a statue of the goddess Athena to stand inside the Parthenon. Crafted from ivory and gold, he designed it to stand 40 feet high. Statues and monuments were being commissioned across the country, and artistic rivalry was intense. Phidias was determined that his Athena would outshine every other statue in Greece.
Phidias' great achievement was to meet this challenge, and after he made the Athena, virtually every other Greek town wanted such a statue.
Phidias was heralded as a genius, but his name became blackened by scandal. On completing the Athena, he was unable to account for all the gold he had used. Phidias was accused of embezzlement by those eager to bring down his powerful patron. Fortunately for Phidias, news of his spectacular Athena had traveled to Olympia. He was now commissioned to make a statue of Zeus to stand inside the temple there. So, in 438 BC, to escape the scandal in Athens, Phidias left for Olympia. The site of the Olympic Games was dominated by a temple. It awaited Phidias's masterpiece. The Olympic Games attracted competitors from all over the Greek world. Wars stopped when the Games were held in honor of Zeus, the supreme god. Phidias arrived in Olympia to take up his new commission. With his reputation on the line, he approached the great temple.
So it seems that the Eleans, having seen or heard about what was up in Athens, decided, we want one of those too, and we want Phidias to make it for us. And they went and they commissioned him to do that.
Until Phidias, ivory carving had only been executed on a small scale. Phidias designed the Zeus to be taller than a 4-story building. It would fill one end of the temple. It was too large to be carved out of solid blocks of ivory. So he developed a technique which has never been surpassed.
The structure of ivory is such that you can unscroll it. You have to imagine it as if you're unpeeling an onion or putting a pencil in an old manual pencil sharpener and turning it, and you get a thin, narrow shaving strip of ivory. And no one had tried to do this before, and that's really what was original.
Phidias developed a secret method for softening the ivory. Only a few ancient recipes survive. Professor Kenneth Lapatin is the first to have rediscovered them.
Some seem to be a bit fantastic, like wrapping them in fish skin, which I have never tried to do. Others say boil 3 days with mandrake root, which seemed a bit dangerous to try. Others said soak in oil, which did nothing for me. But one said soak in vinegar, which I did do, and that produced results. And what happens is that the ivory, which is tooth, it's largely calcium, has some of its chemical components leached out of it, and it becomes soft and flexible. And then you can mold it to shape and dry it out, and it will maintain that shape. And it was Phidias' genius that assembled these techniques from various different crafts to make this wonder of the world.
Phidias and his assistants painstakingly followed this technique of shaping every detail. Every ivory section was made to fit exactly. The Zeus began as a wooden framework. To this, the molded ivory sections were fastened. The statue was built up, piece by piece, to a height of 45 feet. It took over 7 years before Phidias was satisfied everything was perfect. The Zeus was then assembled inside the temple.
It had a great reputation, but none of that really prepared you for that shock when you walked through the temple doors and saw the image. Unlike, I think, all of the other wonders, you couldn't see it from afar. You had to go and enter the temple, and then it hit you all at once. Oh, gee, that really is big. Wow.
The writer Strabo, in the 1st century AD, was critical of its revolutionary composition.
The sculptor may be criticized for not having appreciated the correct proportions. He has shown Zeus seated, so we have the impression that if Zeus moved to stand up, he would unroof the temple.
the Zeus sits still. He's holding his emblems of power, the victory in his right hand, the scepter in his left. But he's not doing anything. The stilling of the god gives him greater power because there's the potential there for action. He's very aware. And it's that calmness that becomes a hallmark of the classical style.
Characteristics of Phidias's world wonder are echoed throughout Western art. From Byzantine images of Christ to 20th century statues of American presidents. In 1914, Daniel Chester French began work on the Lincoln Memorial statue. Using the same composition as the Zeus, Daniel French made the Lincoln statue out of 28 pieces of marble. Phidias had been meticulous in his study of light, but Daniel French discovered on a dull day his sculpture looked flat. He had to install an elaborate lighting setup. The scale of his sculpture was also criticized, this time for being too small. Daniel French had to double its dimensions to satisfy his commissioners. Even then, the Lincoln statue was only half the height of Phidias's Zeus. Over 450 years after Phidias's world wonder was made, Roman soldiers and workmen arrived with special orders from the Emperor Caligula. He had instructed them to bring the statue back to Rome, so he could put his own head on it. Legend recalls the statue let out such a loud cackle of laughter. The scaffolding collapsed and the workmen fled. Luckily for them, the ruthless emperor was assassinated before they returned to Rome, empty-handed. By 391 AD, the Christian church banned pagan cults and closed the temples. The Olympic Games ceased, and the great sanctuary of Olympia fell into disrepair. When the Zeus was 800 years old, it was bought up by Luasus, an imperial chamberlain from Constantinople, and installed in his palace art collection there. Phidias's world wonder would not survive for long. A fire destroyed the palace and the collection, cremating the finest statue of all time. The influence of Greek art and architecture spread into Persia, an enemy of Greece. At the western tip of the Persian Empire lay the once great city of Halicarnassus. It is now the small resort of Bodrum, lying in present-day Turkey. At first, it appears an unlikely site for a world wonder. But in the 4th century BC, this was the capital of a powerful sea empire. Inland from the harbor lie the ruins of a tomb, the most extraordinary building ever constructed. It stood the height of a 14-story building, combined an assortment of styles, and was covered with statues. It has left us the word mausoleum, used to describe monumental tombs ever since. Its style has been copied around the world, from the Freemasons' Lodge in Washington, D.C., to the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, Australia.